Harvard actually had a mailing out to all their students saying that it's effectively violence to refer to a fat person as fat.
Right.
It's effectively violence to refer to a man who imagines himself a woman as a man. But to claim that all the Jews deserve to die, well, that's a political position.
Do you ever think what kind of person you would be in a situation where, let's say, for example, you were transported back to World War II and you were in Nazi Germany and you weren't Jewish? So just if you are Jewish, just pretend like you weren't Jewish and you're being transported back into Nazi Germany, 1930s, early 1940s. What kind of person would you be? Would you be the person that would turn your head away from the atrocities? Would you be the one that would rescue the children from death and from death camps? Would you be the one that would sneak food to those who needed it? Would you be the one to sacrifice yourself and your family for other people, knowing that what was happening to those other people was absolutely wrong, was absolutely pure hate, was absolutely led by something not human? Would you be the person to stand up to evil? That's not an easy question to answer, because unless we're faced with that kind of horror, we don't really know how we would react. Now, some of us might know. Some of us may have already been through situations similar. Some of you may have experienced the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. You may have already seen with your own eyes those that are still alive, that remember the horrors of the Holocaust. Even now, October 7th, those that stood up to evil, that stood up to Hamas while they were raping and mutilating and capturing people and taking them back to Gaza. But imagine making those decisions and imagine having those choices. I'm so terrified of what we're seeing in America right now. I'm terrified of the rise of anti-Semitism, Jew hatred on our campuses. I'm terrified of the fact that we have imported hate into our nation to such an extent that our streets are filled with vile protests against our Jewish allies and Israeli allies. I'm so afraid that our children are being lied to by professors and teachers that we've entrusted and paid for with our tax dollars or even our own private funding, and that they are teaching our children to hate Judeo-Christian values, that they are teaching our children to hate this nation, that we are raising a generation of children that are afraid of doing what they need to do, which is to be brave and to stand up and to believe in freedom and liberty and values. A lot of this doesn't make any sense. It feels like everything is upside down on its head. Our colleges and our universities seem to be overrun with this insanity. Students and presidents alike cannot clearly and without hesitation condemn genocide. That should be like the first major red flag, right? It is shocking. It is shocking. And you have a right to be shocked by this. To break all of this down for you, I have Rabbi Yaakov Menken on the show. I tell you every time I speak with him, and I know every time you listen to him, and if you haven't listened to him before, you need to, it actually feels like you are getting a direct message and a full understanding of what is happening. He is brilliant and he is such a great friend. He is with the Coalition for Jewish Values. He'll discuss this and other important topics with us. But first, I want to tell you about My Pillow. My Pillow is excited to bring you their biggest bedding sale ever, just in time for Christmas gift giving. This is the biggest bed sale of the year, the biggest bedding sale of the year, and they're extending their money back guarantee for Christmas until March 1st. 2024. You won't get that anywhere else. I don't care where you buy your bedding sheets, your towels, my slippers, dog beds. You're not going to get this kind of guaranteed offer. Visit mypillow.com/Carter and enter code Carter at checkout for big discounts, including the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. Go to mypillow.com/CARTER, code Carter, mypillow.com/Carter, CARTER. That's code Carter, CARTER, or call 1-800-685-7221. Grateful again to have Rabbi Yaakov Menken on the show. He is the founding and current managing director of the Coalition of Jewish Values, editor of Cross Currents, and architect of Torah.org. Thank you, Rabbi, for being on the show.
And thank you so much for having me back with you. And I will review immediately. It's the Coalition for Jewish Values. I get offended when our rabbis do that. So when other people do it, you get a free pass.
Okay. The Coalition for Jewish Values.
Yeah, we don't claim to be the coalition of, because that'd be like the repository of Jewish values. You want the repository? It's back there on the shelf,
Blame my pseudo dyslexia on that. I flip things. You can blame it because it's obviously written correctly in front of me. It's fun. It's all funny games. We're joking around, but Rabbi, I am just blown away by what I am witnessing over. Not only, first of all, let me say prayers go out to the people of Israel today who are now being attacked again by rockets from being launched by Hamas, and the insanity of this White House to try to dictate how Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders should handle these terrorists, these demons, these inhumane, monsters that are walking on our earth, because there's no other explanation or word to describe them. So I want to say a prayer out to that. But secondly, Rabbi, what is happening in our country and throughout the world? What is this? We always knew there was anti-Semitism. We knew it. Jew hatred. But this is absolutely insane. What we're seeing on the college campuses, what we're seeing with these protests, what we're seeing in Europe. What is going through your mind when you hear this?
Well, it is a legitimate contest between good and evil, what is going on. And what is absolutely clear to everyone in every other context, you see it get blurred when anti-Semitism comes in. You just found out that about 90% of the feminist organizations in America are not actually feminist. They're willing to abandon their feminism as soon as Jews are involved. It doesn't matter how unacceptable or how obvious or, what have you. It is very clear that they will say, I don't believe those massacres actually happened. We'll do Holocaust denial in Israel in 2024 when everything was live streamed. Everything is out there. The idea that this didn't happen is so patently bogus that even the so-called proponents of this nonsense have to claim that the beheaded babies were done with AI, as if somebody on October 7th had the presence of mind to make up the story and do AI, or maybe it was all a plot done by the Israelis in advance. The whole Hamas massacre was actually done by the Jews. It's like the nonsense that you hear, you would never find in any other situation. Nobody asked about the moral conflict between the British and Americans on one side and the Nazis on the other. Nobody made a moral conflict about Iraq and the need to stamp out terrorism. And by the way, when the Americans bombed hospitals and murdered civilians by the tens of thousands in the course of prosecuting the Iraq war, because everybody recognized that ISIS needed to be eliminated. Zero. And yet now you have all these people calling for a ceasefire, which everybody knows will be broken by Hamas. And everybody already knows that Hamas has promised that they will do it again. So everybody who's calling for a so-called permanent ceasefire without Hamas destroyed wants Jewish women to continue to be raped, wants more murders, wants more beheadings. And by the way, I'm referring to the hostages right now. Why did they keep women hostages? Why did they break the deal? They have broken every ceasefire from 2005 to the current situation to about 2 weeks ago. And now they're claiming, let's make a ceasefire with Hamas intact. That's giving Hamas the opportunity to rebuild, rearm, murder more Jews. I don't care if it's ignorance or animus or just straight out stupidity. It is evil and wrong to be calling for a ceasefire right now.
You're absolutely right. And by the way, it wasn't just the fact that Hamas leadership is coming out. And of course, Hamas, we expect all the horrors of this insane, like I said, demonic group of terrorists. But you hear even throughout the media and social media, which blew my mind again, you know, when you see this, and then we're going to go to the universities, but, you know, Muslim women, obviously many who have been oppressed and who live under oppression, are saying, oh, you know what? These are terrorists, by the way, as well. Women who are terrorists coming out on videos and saying, you know what? It's okay that our men raped and pillaged and mutilated the Jewish people because that's like a requirement of them. I mean, it's totally fine that they do this. They're not going to be punished for this. This type of rhetoric that we're seeing it's disgusting. It's terrifying. But what's more horrific, what makes this even worse, is the fact that you have academic institutions in America who have presidents in these most elite colleges that cannot condemn genocide before Congress or anyone else, or before God or whatever, or even themselves as a human being, cannot condemn it openly against the Jewish people. And there are students on all of these campuses, because, sir, I have been there, who have said exactly the same, that it's an opinion. I go, genocide really isn't an opinion. There's no opinion to genocide. I want to play Liz McGill here for you, and then I'd love for you to respond. She obviously retired from UPenn after pressure was put on her. They forced her into resigning from the University of Pennsylvania. I want you to take a listen to what she said before Congress.
At Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If the
yes or no?
If the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes.
It was like leading her to the trough to drink the water, like saying, like, okay, this can't be real. This is what, you know, the Congresswoman was saying. This can't be real. You can't be answering this way. I'm going to give you another opportunity. I'm going to give you another one. I did the same when I was on the college campuses, and this was unbelievable to me. Nobody, hardly nobody. There was one gal at UPenn and one of the people that I interviewed at Harvard that were able to answer that question clearly, but that was it.
You know, it's amazing that people think that this was somehow, scripted and prepped by Representative Stefanik. She has said in an interview, she said, look, I wrote the question during a break and I wanted to lead to a discussion. I wanted them I wanted to throw them the easiest, most obvious softball question in the world, get them to answer yes. Obviously, it's hateful to call for genocide, so that we can have a conversation about groups like Students for Justice in Palestine that exist beginning to end to call for genocide against the Jews. And to point out that calling there is only one solution is obviously reminiscent of Hitler's final solution. An intifada revolution is a call for violence against the Jews. That it's obvious that from the river to the sea is a call for ethnic cleansing of the Jews from Israel. All of these obvious things were going to stem from this obvious softball starting question: is it wrong to call for genocide of the Jews on your campus? And then she got the shock of her life when the presidents of 3 of the most elite universities in the United States of America showed all the moral clarity of the architects of Hitler's final solution. Let's point out
That's what's terrifying.
That half the architects of the final solution at the Wannsee Conference had PhDs. From what was considered the height of academia at the time, pre-Nazi Germany. The Nazis just came into Germany, which was considered the center of culture, the center of the Enlightenment. And here you had these enlightened professors saying all the Jews deserve to die. And here we are in 2023, the heads of 3 of the most elite institutions in the country say, yep, it might be it might be a problem. Harvard actually had a mailing out to all their students saying that it's effectively violence to refer to a fat person as fat.
Right.
It's effectively violence to refer to a man who imagines himself a woman as a man. But to claim that all the Jews deserve to die, well, that's a political position.
Oh, that's an opinion. That's what
right.
they said.
But no, it's not just an opinion. It's an opinion about a political matter. This is all about Palestine and Palestine affairs. Do you understand?
I think it goes far further, Rabbi, than just Palestine. I think it goes far further. It's far-reaching. It's what we see when we see, in Moscow, the anti-Semitism or the Jew hatred on the rise, or what we see here in America, in Detroit, and in other parts of the world, like in Sweden and in Amsterdam, when they marched down the street like 10 years ago, when we saw the Arab migrants marching down the street alongside some of the Dutch, not many, but alongside some of the Dutch, with caricatures of Jewish people that were reminiscent of the Holocaust. It was disgusting. And people that I know that were Jewish had to leave Holland. They left Amsterdam because they were terrified of living there. And now they're here. And we have the same group of people marching down the streets, doing the same things and threatening to ethnically cleanse an entire group of people in 2023. And by the way, I want to ask you this question because I want everyone who is listening to us to understand that this is the biggest and most important moment in our lives. Whether you choose to remain silent and allow evil to persist, or whether you choose to stand up for what is righteous and good and God. That is the two, and humanity. And right now and it's going to make me cry, but I feel that there are a lot of people out here right now Rabbi, who remind me of the cowards and the evil people that existed in Europe during World War II and in the United States that knew people were being hauled off to concentration camps, knew children were being murdered, and did nothing, did absolutely nothing to stand up for them, to stop that, to stop it from happening. You tell me if I'm wrong. Are we the same cowards? Did we learn nothing from history?
Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. To the list, every one of your listeners, every one of the viewers, I'm talking to you. If you watch this video or listen to this podcast and say, well, that was really interesting and informative, and you walk away and you don't do something, you are part of the problem, not the solution. If you don't act to stop this is not a Jewish problem. This is an American problem. The Jews are going to survive. I'm just going to put it out there on right out there. Look at Nazi Germany today. It for decades was divided into two countries where relatives couldn't see each other. The society is utterly destroyed. Germany will never again be a global superpower. Spain will never again be a global superpower. Persia will never again be a global superpower. You have the opportunity right now to just let it happen and let America be one of the next one to go into the relic of history. Am Yisrael Chai, which translates the nation of Israel lives, is actually a divine promise. It's right there in the Bible. The Jews are going to make it. The Jews are always going to survive. Hitler tried to get rid of us. Guess what? We're here, and to be called a Nazi is to be called an epithet. Well, this is America's deciding moment right now. If all the people pulling funding from Harvard are Jews, you've lost the country. Civilization is gone. If you continue to donate to an alma mater which has a student-funded chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, you are funding Hamas. You are funding ISIS. You are funding terror. Don't claim that your university, they gave you a great education, they gave you a career, they gave you blah, blah, blah. Right now, if they have a chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, it means they're being taken over by the woke left, by the DEI nonsense. By the way, I would actually say the same thing to any university with a DEI department. You're funding the destruction of American civilization. You're not funding your alma mater. You're not funding some kid's education. Your kid would do much better off going to some two-bit trade school than to go to some elite college where they learn DEI racist boxes and about how we should support terrorism, at least when it comes to certain minorities. Because that's right now, I mean, it used to be, you go back a couple decades and everybody was out there, that at least the left was protesting for real problems, real genocide, Darfur and Bosnia and Rwanda. Today, it's about Palestine, and Palestine, while the state of civil rights and human rights around the world declines year over year. You look at, don't imagine you're going to be okay. The countries where Christians experience the worst persecution around the world, you know what they all are? Judenrein. They've already gotten rid of all their Jews. The Christians are next, the decent people, anybody who values civilization. So these guys taking over the campus, they are after you and your kids. Don't think it's going to stop with the Jews.
HelloFresh. I tell you about HelloFresh. It is so fantastic. And in fact, I am able to do what I need to do for my family because HelloFresh makes it so easy for me. My daughter loves to cook with me. I get the recipes delivered right to my front door. They're farm fresh. They're pre-portioned ingredients. They have seasonal recipes delivered right there, like I said, to your home. You can skip those trips to the grocery store and all of that wasted time, and you can count on HelloFresh to make home cooking fun and easy and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And I'm not just saying this. I'm going to be posting some of my favorite recipes at HelloFresh on Instagram so you can watch Annalise and I do some great cooking. I want you to go to HelloFresh.com/Sara Carter free. That's SARACARTERFREE and use Sara Carter free for free breakfast for life. Think about that. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Sara Carter free with code Sara Carter free. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Hey folks, make sure you're subscribed down below. It really does help us out. Also, subscribe to the Sara Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. I don't care which podcast app it is. Subscribe to us, give us 5 stars, and leave a review. I read them all. By the way, it really does help. The useful idiots, those like President Claudine Gay, who is not only a plagiarist, but I think should have been removed for her statements alone. I can't even believe Harvard's kept her. You know, those are the kind of people that make evil possible. They're the kind of people that are like the perfect, wingman for evil. Or wing woman or whatever they want to be, right?
The fact that they kept her is a travesty. It indicates the moral decay of, that Harvard used to be a great institution. Scott Adams had a very apt Dilbert rebirth, or whatever he calls his new reboot of Dilbert. He had a fantastic cartoon where this guy comes for a job interview and says, you don't indicate your college degree. And the guy says, well, I have one. He says, it's really odd that you would come for a job interview here and not indicate from where. I'm guessing it's Harvard, wasn't it? And he says, thank you for your time. I'll let myself out. Like, I mean, right. a member of the class of Harvard class of 29, would you hire that person? You know that person is a racist or a lemming. I'm sorry. You know it. This person is not worth, Claudine Gay, by the way, it's the fact that they kept her. It's not like she was an academic heavyweight to begin with.
Right.
I'm not so big on that plagiarism charge because a lot of it was she failed to put quotes around when she was citing a source, but sometimes she was lazy about that too. And a student would probably have gotten a failing grade on some of those papers. But the real issue is she's produced like 11 major papers and no books or something. She is a DEI hire to begin with. Right. She was hired as, let's put the black woman there. And she's working out about as well as Kamala Harris.
Because there's going to be people listening to this and they're not going to understand the diversity and equity part of what you're talking about. Maybe they don't know it. They don't have kids in the system. Explain that a little bit, because that's happened in Texas. And that's actually quite a big deal here as well. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies.
Which is really dogmatism, exclusion, and intolerance.
Correct. And it has ostracized so many students that have, and this is not just about white students, Jewish students, Asian students, because they've also pushed out a ton of Asian students due to this DEI. But it's like, it is effectively turned our universities into these non-scientific, dogmatic, ideological, like extreme radical institutions where people like President Claudine Gay, can run amok, where you can be threatened, like you said, oh, well, don't say anything about someone's weight, or that's, you're going to get thrown out, or don't say anything about this or that. I mean, about someone's sex, because you're going to be removed as a professor from this university. We actually interviewed a professor yesterday who had that same problem, an anthropology professor who couldn't even follow the science because the bones may not be male or female. No, they're male or female. That's what we are. We're either a male or a female, and they didn't like that. So explain a little bit how this has shaped what is happening now, Rabbi, with this rise in anti-Semitism, how this narrative has turned on. It's not just anti-Zionism. I mean, it's anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. Explain how this happened.
Well, DEI is the belief that Nigerians are racists somehow because they're successful. Oh, but they're black, so we'll give them a pass on being successful. They're allowed to be successful. It happens to be that the Nigerian American population in the United States is apparently more successful than white Americans, which is about the ethic of the American idea that everybody has equality of opportunity, and if you work, you can succeed. And if you have a dream, you can succeed. And Nigerian Americans come, the ones who are fortunate enough to get in here are delighted to be here. They work very hard to succeed here. And guess what they do? And they take nothing for granted the way a lot of other people do. Meanwhile, DEI is putting the rest of us into racist boxes. If you are white, you are privileged. If anything went well for you in your life, it's because you are privileged. It's because you were given that, not because you were successful. And if you are black, you are inherently downtrodden. You are inherently a victim of racism, even if you never experienced racism in your life. That's how we get an Ilhan Omar, who was a descendant of one of the Somalia's noble clans. She was a member of the upper class, who then, because of the way the upper class there destroyed the entire country, she went as a refugee, brought in by well-meaning Europeans, brought in by well-meaning Americans, where she got an education and sent to Congress. Yeah, she experienced a whole lot of oppression, hatred, and bigotry, and she experienced discrimination as her Holocaust survivor descendant colleagues did not. That's what she said. That's how you get the DEI narrative is because of your skin color, it must be that's how you were treated. And that determines your background. That determines everything about you. It's a basic racist division. And just understanding how stupid it is. Let me give you a perfect example. In Deal, New Jersey is a community of Syrian Jews. They live there because they were ethnically cleansed out of Syria by Arab rioting mobs after Israel actually had, the Jews had a state, and they couldn't manage to destroy the state. So we're going to take out our wrath on the Jews who we have here in our country. So instead of over 100,000 Jews in Syria today, you have 0. Nobody's allowed into Syria, yet no Jew is allowed in Syria, and yet nobody calls it an apartheid state. Think about that for a minute. Nobody calls Syria an apartheid state. They ethnically cleansed out all their Jews. That's the natural state of affairs. That's a good thing. I mean, obviously, Syria has done just fabulous ever since they ethnically cleansed out their Jews, right? I mean, real master place of civilization and good conduct, and they've only massacred 100,000 of their own civilians over the last few years. Great place to be. Meanwhile, the Syrian refugees of today, because it's really not doing so well, they've come to America, and DEI sets those folks up as oppressed because they are Arab brown people from the Middle East. But the Syrian Jews, being Jews, are white privileged oppressors. Get that. Syrian Jews ethnically cleansed out of Syria are considered oppressors, and the descendants of the Syrian oppressors who committed pogroms and ethnic cleansing are considered oppressed because they're from Syria. That's DEI in a nutshell. A racist inversion of history and morality wrapped up in a tight little bow. There is not a member of DEI staff at any institution who I would trust as a decent human being by any standard.
I absolutely love that you explained this so well, because this is another reason, folks, that we need to get actively involved. This is why you need to stand up to this. Like, if you have any inclination of saving this country, you need to get involved in your own communities. You need to look at what they are teaching your children, both in the university systems and in high school and in elementary school. And you need to get out there and stand up to this. It is unacceptable that we are lying to our children, and we are raising, like I said, Rabbi, when I was out there at Harvard, at UPenn, and I'm interviewing people, we are raising basically people that are not only being fooled. But we are creating a generation of cowards, because I'm going to tell you this. We have parents that will say, and I've heard this so many times, and I don't know if you've heard it too, Rabbi, but I just tell my kid, you know what, just get through it. Don't argue with the professor. Just do your work, graduate. Don't worry about it. Once you're out, you're your own person. You can do whatever you want. Just get that diploma, no matter what. Well, I disagree with that now more than ever. I think you need to tell your kids, stand up to that professor. And if this school is racist, if this school cannot say genocide is wrong, if this school is backing someone who is working for the destruction of this nation and for other people, then you not only need to stand up to it, you need to leave and find another place to go. We need to pull our kids out of these universities and show that we mean business. Otherwise, I think we're raising generations and generations of cowards, of kids that will go to the workforce and then not stand up for themselves, of kids that will go into the bureaucracy and then just do exactly what the bureaucrats tell them to do, even if it goes against every moral standard that they hold dear, of kids who would turn in their Jewish neighbors if it ever came to that point again, because they were too scared to do what was right and stand in front of their neighbor's house and say, unacceptable, shoot me first before you take them. Right? I mean, I feel like there has to be a point where we as a people stop and really think about the consequences of what we are teaching our children and what we are saying to ourselves.
You know, some of the hijackers of some of those hijacked airplanes said, you know, they separated out the Jews from the non-Jews. They didn't, by the way, did not separate out the Israelis from the other travelers. They separated the Jews from the non-Jews. If you were an Israeli Arab, you went one way, and if you were an American Jew, you went the other. And there was a certain plane captain who stood in front of the terrorists and said, we are all Jews here. We are all Jews. We will not let you divide us into little boxes. If you plan to keep the Jewish hostages, you have to keep us all. And he refused to be let go. And so did the other, obviously, the rest of the flight staff remained with. And I believe many of the civilians, or if not all of them, also remained. They just said, we're not going to play this game. We're not going to allow this racism to continue. We're not going to be part of it. If you have kids on campus just keeping their head down and letting it happen, they are part of the problem. You know, Cooper Union, you pretend it's about the Israelis, and then you have Palestinian protesters find out that there are Jews in the library, because guess what? Jews are studious. You have the Jews in the library just trying to get an education. They stormed the library building, such that the librarians had to lock the library and hide the Jews inside. And by the way, they told the Jews you can go hide in the attic. Wow, that sounds familiar. You know, this is supposed to be the United States of America. If you imagine that this is American, you know, this is the result of these so-called tolerant policies. This is the result of saying, let's let in 1 million people who hate your values and hate your country. Now we've got the people who hate your values and hate your country running the country. You've got
basically the Trojan horse. Basically, the Trojan horse is
American civilization and hates the Jews. All squad of people who hate America and hate the Jews. Rashida Tlaib, who in her first day in Congress, replaced Israel on the map with Palestine. All of Israel is stolen land. Did you know, Sarah, that the first trope of the anti-Semite is that all Jewish property is stolen? That dates back to the Bible. And so she just got all of Israel is stolen land. But look at this map of Palestine. Just happens to be the map of Israel down to the millimeter. They don't want any Lebanese land. They don't want any Egyptian land. They don't want Jordanian land. They don't even want the Golan Heights, because that actually belongs back to Syria, so the Syrians can resume firing missiles at the Israeli civilians down below. That's, you know, but their map of Palestine is the Jews don't get to have a homeland. The promised land wasn't actually promised.
Right.
Every American knows the story of the Promised Land. Isn't it amazing how people seem to forget where the Promised Land is because it was promised to the Jews?
Oh, and it requires that if you believe that, and if you are a Christian and you believe that, and you know that story to be absolutely essential and central to your beliefs, and you turn your back on that, you're basically turning your back on your own beliefs. You're turning your back on God.
Oh, the idea that there can be a Christianity that doesn't have the Jews as rightful owners of that land, and that's where the temple will be rebuilt.
Rabbi, what do you say to critics who say, well, you know what, we can't crack down on this rhetoric because it just goes against the First Amendment? I mean, I think we already talked a little bit about that, of why this is so astonishingly ridiculous, but explain what someone can say to a critic who brings that up.
Well, first of all, the First Amendment doesn't mean you get to use my space and my funding to send your message. It means you have the ability to do even hateful things and say hateful things, as long as it's limited speech. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say you can do hateful things. You cannot. But you can speak hateful speech. You can march as Nazis. They have the right to march as Nazis. But decent people have the right. First of all, decent people absolutely have the right to criticize them and call them the bigots that they are, and to call them the sick Nazis that they are. But second of all, that doesn't mean they get to march across your campus. That doesn't mean a private university is a private institution. It has a governing code of conduct. If that code of conduct prohibits hate speech, then the university is violating its own code of conduct. It allows people to march across the campus calling for genocide. Period. Full stop. No question about it. Any university with a SJP chapter is violating its own code of conduct. It may also be violating federal law, because if it recognizes an SJP chapter and gives it space and student funding, SJP declared itself part of the Hamas terror organization. That means they're supporting a foreign terror organization, and the president of the university should actually go to jail. But, and nobody actually does that. Congress is actually starting to ask the questions. I get to actually put a little feather. Coalition for Jewish Values actually helped a congressman compose the letter, Mary Miller, that's going to the DOJ saying, we want answers on this. How is it that SJP is getting funded? There were numerous congressmen, specifically Burleson of Missouri. I want to give a shout out to him because he specifically referred to Students for Justice in Palestine and said it is inherently hateful. It is inherently discriminatory towards Jewish students. How do you tolerate a chapter of that on your campus? That's a great question to be asking. That's how you restore civilization to its foundings.
When are they expected to answer those questions? I mean, they're expected to send a letter in writing. Are they going to be testifying before Congress? Do you know?
Well, DOJ was first asked for a written response, but it could definitely lead to hearings. That's part of the... That's what's going.
That's going to be fascinating to me. That is going to be, and congratulations on assisting and putting together those questions, because I don't think there's anybody better than you and the group to do that. Our education in America right now, it seems to be on decline, Rabbi. Both college and kindergarten through 12th grade, they're struggling. I mean, this is all part of those trends that we're seeing and this breakdown in our education system. Do you think we're going to be able to recover from that?
I think that civilization can yet be saved. I do think we're doing an outsized portion. And, I think that your Christian viewers and your pro-values viewers of all faiths should be taking a very serious look at Coalition for Jewish Values and what we're doing, because it may be that we have theological differences, but if you look at what we are doing to promote the same agenda items, and that includes pro-life and opposing men and women's sports and, all in area after area of the values agenda, we're actually bang for buck, delivering much more than much larger Christian organizations, because here we are, this tiny group that is saying at the same time, wait a minute, it's not just Christians who care about those things. Those are foundational values. What does America call their founding values? Judeo-Christian ethics. If you don't support the Jews or standing up for your values, that's key. And also, by the way, we're inerrant in calling out anti-Semitism. What happened 5 years ago? What happened when Ilhan Omar was first elected to Congress? We were pointing out her racism. We were pointing out the problem. What was the ADL doing? Talking about Charlottesville and claiming Trump called Nazis fine people.
Rabbi, where can our listeners go to get more information, to accurate information, to teach their children, even though their schools are not teaching them on a public level, the accurate information about Israel and the Jewish state and the Jewish people? Where can we go?
Well, you got to start with Coalition for Jewish Values, self-promotion, of course. We are the repository of truth, like we said at the beginning. It's a coalition of Jewish values. We're it. We know what's going on. But seriously, check out cjvalues.org and CJ Values on Twitter and your favorite social media. But also, you want to know what's going on in Israel? Israel has their Hasbara is showing people what's actually going on, the actual truth. Look at the IDF channel. They will show you the videos of what a precision strike looks like, of what it looks like when they bomb a tiny little area. And because Hamas stores their munitions underneath buildings throughout neighborhoods, the entire neighborhood is destroyed, not by Israel's fire, but by Hamas munitions going off. They will show you their efforts to protect civilians while Hamas is trying to shoot at them. All of these things, what's it called? Squiggle eye, @IDF on Twitter, for example, and on Instagram and everything else. There's all these, the truth is out there. Go visit your local Holocaust museum. All of this stuff is real. It's so easy. Go find a Chabad house, talk to the rabbi. It's just so easy if you want to know what's really going on. Christians United for Israel is doing events all over the country. Go learn what's actually going on. You can prevent your children. This left-wing indoctrination it is so destructive. And it's destructive to American civilization more than anything else. And that's my recommendation.
You're absolutely right. You said at the top of the show, Rabbi, it's what do we want to do? Do we want to stand on the side of good and watch our nation prosper? Or do we want to follow in the footsteps of all of those civilizations that have collapsed underneath the feet of their people because they were too cowardly or too evil to stand up to that evil? So thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. I can't wait to get you back on. Your conversations are some of the most enlightening, and I feel just blessed every time I talk to you. I just feel like I'm getting some kind of download from heaven here. Just kind of being downloaded. The
repository of values. That's what we were talking about the whole time.
The repository of values. Yes. I got my shield now. I feel like I can lead an army. Let's do it. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Again, thank you so much for joining me, Rabbi. I really appreciate your perspective and your counsel at this important time in our history. We all have to be aware. Remember, folks, follow Rabbi Yaakov Menken on all of his social media. And please go to the Coalition for Jewish Values to learn more. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sara Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. I want you to follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless the state of Israel and all of our Jewish brothers and sisters. And God bless the great state of Texas.